Hi, my name is Heather Bennett with the Laguna Woods Democratic Club, and this is...
I'm Alan Feldman from the Laguna Woods Democratic Club, and we want to thank you for taking your time to be with us today. You know, depending on when you're watching this program, the election is going to be held in a month or even less. By this time, we all know pretty much everything we want to know about the presidential candidates. In fact, we probably know more than we want to know about them. But there are a lot of other candidates running for a lot of other offices. And because the presidential race takes up so much energy, so much time, so much coverage, we have a hard time sometimes getting the information that we want and need on these other offices. But the fact of the matter is that the people running for these other offices, when they get elected, they're going to affect your day-to-day life a lot more than who the president is. We have two candidates we're going to speak with today. The first is Dr. Ari Grayson, who's the Democratic candidate for the 37th state California Senatorial District. That's the senatorial district that covers Laguna Woods. After Dr. Grayson, we're going to be speaking with Ron Verestay, who's the Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, the 45th Congressional District, which also includes Laguna Woods. So first, I want to thank very much for Dr. Grayson. Thank you for being here today. And just in way of a little bit background, Ari Grayson, the doctor in front of his name does not denote a medical doctor. He has a doctorate in architecture. He's an architect, he's a builder. He's helped design and build all sorts of housing, private buildings, public buildings, hospitals, schools. He's also a scientist, a research scientist, and he's also an educator, a doctor, a teacher, pardon me. So he comes with a varied background, a background that's a lot more varied than most people who are running for public office. So first, again, thank you very much for being with us today. And I'm going to start with, I guess, the most elemental question. What motivated you to run for state senate?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to join you, and I always love being with my friends in Laguna Woods. So thank you all. You know, what really motivated me was learning more about John Moorlach and watching his behavior in the year and a half since he became our state senator. I had not intended to run for office. It wasn't even on my radar. I haven't run for public office before. But I wasn't about to let the kind of views that I'm hearing from Mr. Moorlach go unanswered. I think they need to be challenged, and they need to be challenged with a very strong voice. So, you know, my feeling is that I bring the kind of skills to the table, and I am the kind of citizen that would represent us the way our founding fathers truly intended our government to be run, by people who have good life experience that they can bring to the job, very nice, rich, varied background. And as you said, you know, and as my grandmother might tease me, I'm not a real doctor, but I do have 2 master's degrees and a PhD, and my background is in architectural engineering, as well as in environmental psychology. So I bring a good, varied set of skills to the table. As you mentioned, I've worked as a consultant to schools, hospitals. I worked with Mayo Clinic and Mayo Clinic Hospital, as well as doing research both at the hospital for some of their facilities and for some of the schools that I designed. So a very unusual background, and hopefully a lot of strengths that will benefit us across the board.
So infrastructure is something that you are interested in and familiar with.
Oh, absolutely. But infrastructure is only a very small portion of my interest. But infrastructure, interestingly enough, is something that is very much a passion of mine on many levels. One, several years ago, I heard the CEO of Sony Corporation at an event. And somebody was interviewing him, and the gentleman said, "Why is it that you're taking your time? You're such a busy man. Why are you taking your time to be at this kind of event?" He said, "You cannot be a great nation without having great engineers." One of the things that we know about infrastructure is that it serves us so well in our society. It gives us the things that we need, whether in our case, whether it's buildings so that we have water recapture. We know that we're suffering tremendously still with drought conditions.
Right.
Whether it's roads, whether it's bridges. In our case also, we're looking at sediment relocation to help stem the challenges that we're facing from rising sea levels. So all of these things are enormously important, and not just to me, but to the people of Southern California. But one of the great things about investing in infrastructure is we know historically, and a recent research study was done as well, that showed that when the economy turned down like it did several years ago, we get a multiplier effect of 4.0 for every dollar that we invest in infrastructure. In other words, for every $1 we spend, we see $4 rippling through our economy. But that's when the economy is downturned. So what happens when the economy is doing well? And we're starting to see much more strength going into our economy now. But what the research has also shown is that even when the economy is doing well, we see a multiplier effect of over 2. So again, for every dollar we spend, we get $2 back. So we're creating good jobs. We're creating the things that we need in order to move people around our communities. And as I say, making sure that we have the water that we are going to require for both businesses, well, not both, but businesses, agriculture, and individual consumption.
One of the things I've heard you speak several times, and one of the things that's always impressed me and interests me about you is your connecting of issues involved. You know, it's not like infrastructure exists in a vacuum as opposed to the general economy. So I'm going to ask you a question. Just the economy. What are the type of things? How do they mix together? And what are the type of things in the economy that you think we should be doing to help drive the state and the country forward?
Well, first of all, I do appreciate that observation that I like to tie things together. I take the approach, and this is from a famous writer who said, for every complex problem, there's a solution. Simple, neat, and wrong. We need to be more comprehensive in how we look at our problems, because we're always looking at the law of unintended consequences, that perhaps we do something and it causes problems elsewhere. So we not only have to look at what those problems might be that we had not intended, but also what benefits may we have when we recognize these things are all interconnected. So for example, when I talk about infrastructure, we're looking at creating good jobs. Well, those jobs are going to require engineers, construction workers. We're going to have this whole ripple through our economy. When we're talking about our education system, we need to make sure that we have people who are trained for the high-tech jobs of the future. We all know if we're not going to delude ourselves with this fantasy that we will bring back jobs that have shipped overseas, those are not the jobs that we need. What we need are to create the high-tech jobs in innovation like we've seen over the last generation come out of Silicon Valley. And that's what my goal is, to try and bring here not only to the 37th Senate District, but all across Southern California. Now, one of the great blessings that we have here in this Senate District is the University of California at Irvine. Absolutely. It is one of the top 10 public universities in the United States. That is absolutely phenomenal for a university which is less than 50 years old, or I think it just turned 50, so let me correct myself there. So we have this tremendous resource. We want to make sure that it is properly funded. We also know that a tremendous amount of invaluable research comes out of these institutions. So when people disparage, folks in the Ivy Towers, I try to tell my friends here in Laguna Woods that, well, over at UCI's Stem Cell Research Center, they're doing research on cures for Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, other forms of dementia. When you look at what they're doing, it's work that's illegal in 5 of our United States. 5 of them, their work is illegal. But UCI is taking the leadership role because they recognize the importance and the value that it brings to our communities. We know that the biomedical engineers are going to be generating the next generation of knee replacement or hip replacement. We want to make sure that our people in the colleges and universities are well prepared for the next generation of technologies and for the needs facing our community. So all of these things are interconnected. When we have a well-educated population, we're able to compete against the other nations of the world. So again, when we come back to education, what we're looking at is we have to have a workforce that is trained to deal with China, Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom. The next on that list of world's great economies? California. We're number 5. So we need to make sure, if we are going to compete with these nations, that we have the skills among our population to provide that and attack it aggressively. I think what's most impressive is when you look at California historically, and we see that our schools and universities, our colleges and universities, were free. or nearly free until the early 70s. That was remarkable. But we were able to compete, and we are still competing against these other nations with a fraction of the population that they have, which tells me another thing. Californians are amazing individuals. We're creative, we're smart, and if we make sure that all of the people that live among us have the best education possible, we can do incredible things. And that's my goal, is to make sure that we have the strength to do the things that we need to do to serve our population well. When I look at the positions of someone like a John Morlock, who's constantly attacking our budget, he's constantly attacking Caltrans, and trust me, I am not saying that Caltrans or any organization is the be-all or end-all, but you have to look at the reality. It is not what you are saving us by going after these kinds of programs. It is what you are costing us, and he is costing us dearly. We need to be smarter, not just like he's trying to do, it seems, is being clever. We need to be smart.
Yes.
Well, I want to ask you something about, I know this is not a state issue, but it's something that people are very interested in Laguna Woods, is Social Security. It's always hearing about Social Security is trouble. So if you could just briefly, just as I said, I know it's not a state issue, just give us what you think about it, what we need to do to keep that system going, and if you think it's worth keeping it going.
Oh, I absolutely think it's worth going. We know that generations of senior citizens across our nation have depended on their Social Security. It's not going to help them do everything that they need in their lives, but it's a safety net. Right. We don't want our seniors to be in a position where they have to make the decision, as so many have, between their food and getting their medicine, or perhaps halving their dose of medication in order to make it last longer because it costs them hundreds of dollars each month to replace that. No human being should be put in that position. But going back to that, so something that does affect them a little bit more directly, many of them receive pensions. And what we've seen is Mr. Morlock going after the pensions of public service employees, teachers, firefighters, police officers, at the same time that Mr. Morlock is taking an $84,000 a year pension from his time at the county. Other Board of Supervisors have declined to take their pension. He hasn't.
Wow.
And he's drawing his Senate salary at the same time.
Very good. Oh, well,
sadly, we are just about out of time. I want to, first of all, thank you again for coming here and speaking with us today. And where can people get in touch with you if people want to contribute to the campaign, people want to lend their support?
Thank you.
How can they get in touch with you?
I appreciate that enormously. The best way to get in touch with me is simply going to www.arigrayson.com. And it's just my name. It's spelled ARIGRAYSON.
Okay,
great.
very
Thank
good.
you.
Well, thank you
you
again, too, very much. And we will be back in just a moment. We're going to be speaking with another candidate, Ron Veristay, Democratic candidate for the 45th Congressional District. And you've been listening to Dr. Ari Grayson, who is the Democratic candidate for the 37th Senatorial District of California State Senate. Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Great. That was a perfect interview, really.
Parkinson's disease is a neurological movement disorder affecting an estimated 1 million Americans, including many under age 40. The American Parkinson Disease Association is the largest grassroots network in the United States, working to help ease the burden and find the cure for those coping with Parkinson's. Visit apdaoptimism.org today to find out how you can help millions live with dignity and optimism. Your action today will help APDA put an end to Parkinson's disease.
Well, welcome back. We're going to speak with another of our good Democratic candidates. We're going to speak with Ron Veristay. Ron is the Democratic candidate for the 45th Congressional District, which is the district that covers Laguna Woods. Ron Veristay really embodies the American dream. His parents were immigrants. They immigrated to this country. Ron is a first-generation native-born American. Ron, educated here in the United States, he has a college degree and a post-college degree. He's a scientist. He's an engineer. He's owned his own business in Orange County for, I believe, over 30 years, and he's lived in Orange County for 35 years. He's a political activist. Many people in the community know him. He's very well versed with the problems and issues that the people in Orange County face on a daily basis. So Ron, I want to first thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time. And I just want to ask again, just a general question, is what motivated you to run for U.S. Congress?
First of all, I want
to
to thank everyone for watching, and thank you both for inviting me to be here. So I'm a scientist, like you mentioned, I'm a scientist, engineer, and a small business owner. I have a business in communications, robotics, and artificial intelligence. And I've been a problem solver. Over 30 years now, this is what I've done in my life. I'm not a career politician, and frankly, I think we have enough lawyers in Congress. I would think you would agree with that. And it's time to have some people that are real problem solvers. And no offense to those who are lawyers watching this, but I think we have plenty of lawyers, and we need people that are not necessarily going to take marching orders or debate something to death, but to actually try to solve a problem. And I think that my opponent is a career politician who is not a small business owner, does not understand days in and out of hiring people, firing people, trying to make ends meet, pay taxes, pull your own weight, and to do this every day for the last 30 years in my case.
Well,
Great.
Let's get right to the nitty-gritty, I guess, hit the issues here. One of the things that's most important to many people here at Laguna Woods Village, obviously, is Social Security. So I'd like to get your thoughts about it. We hear it's in trouble, we hear this, we hear that. So what do you think, and what do you think we should do to keep this system going that serves so many people well?
Well, let's talk about both Social Security and Medicare. And I think the rhetoric that you hear a lot is that it's awful. It is not awful. In fact, it's an excellent program. Medicare alone has only a 3% overhead. That means every penny that's paid into Medicare, 97% of it is spent on the patients. These are great programs, and Social Security is like a pension system. These are not entitlements. And I believe not only should I be defending them, but to look for ways to make them better, fine-tune it, if you might say. And I think that, for example, looking at the Consumer Price Index, that needs to be recalculated correctly. It is right now very difficult for seniors to afford housing, very difficult for them to juggle their medical bills and do that all with the Social Security check. So I think that it's best that we look at how Consumer Price Index is calculated, because that is really how they calculate how much each person gets in their Social Security checks. And the other one is the pharmaceuticals. We need to be able to renegotiate prices with them. Medicare is the largest insurance company in the United States, and it does not have the right to negotiate pharmaceutical prices when every other insurance company does, including VA. And so I think it's just incredibly unfair, and it was almost set that way to become a slush fund for the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, yeah, unfortunately.
That's right. And there's a question, I'm sure you're aware, there's a question on the ballot, a ballot initiative in California, so that the state of California is only paying what the VA pays.
I love that. I think that's phenomenal. I hope everyone votes for that and passes it. It will finally make our state even more solvent, where we're not throwing money away to enrich the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
Now, being here on the West Coast and close to Asia, trade is a huge part of the economy here in Orange County, all up and down California. So I'd like to get your feelings, your positions on the trade. It's becoming more and more important, obviously, nowadays, with the world being flat.
Well, they label it as a fair and free trade.
Yes.
And no offense to President Obama, but I'm very skeptical, because we've never had a fair nor a free trade. These are not fair and free trade agreements. They typically end up hurting our economy, hurting our labor forces. The intention was, when they created these trade agreements, it was to pull the other nations that are in agreement with us to bring them to our standard. But what has really happened is we're racing to the bottom. We are actually causing these countries to become the drain for the money that's being spent, and lowering everyone else's standard to their level so that we can be competitive. And that is just completely wrong. And there's another one that many Republican listeners might enjoy hearing, is that most trade agreements have a sovereignty agreement, which means, for example, if a state passes a certain law, that now the trade agreement doesn't have that law in their agreement, that company that is exercising that business practice can turn around and sue that state and say, we don't care the sovereignty of your state and what it says. The trade agreement says we're allowed to do this. And now if you want us to leave, you must pay us. And that's already happening in the Great Lakes area, where companies are suing the Canadian government because of NAFTA, saying that they have spent enormous amount of money there, and if they have to pick up and leave, they have to recover their investors' losses. And so they're suing the government of Canada for this. And they do it in an arbitration court where governments don't even get a chance to truly be heard. And this is why I'm running to be the voice of the people, is that we need people to fight for our voices. When is that ever important?
Yeah, so would that be the TPP then? Is that
Right,
what you're
the
referencing?
Trans-Pacific
Yeah,
Partnership,
right.
and before that, NAFTA and CAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the Central American Free Trade Agreement, all have been disasters. And sadly to say, one of them was under President Clinton, and this one President Obama is pushing for, and I'm very skeptical, and I'd rather be the benefit of the doubt to be given to the American people than to the big corporations that have been pushing for this.
Yeah.
One of the good segue into another issue, because people who are interested in trade are often people who benefit from trade agreements, people who contribute a lot of money to political campaigns. Now, I know that's one of the issues that is near and dear to your heart. So I'd like you to tell people about what you think about money in politics and where you stand with that.
If I could get $1 for every time I've been screaming against money in politics, that is a very near and dear passion in my heart. You've heard tons of statistics this year from various candidates for president, but here's another one that maybe some of you haven't heard. 132 Americans control 60% of all the super PAC money in the United States. So 60% of all the big dark money that's being spent on elections each year is by only 132 people. Is that fair? Is that the kind of America our forefathers envisioned? I don't think so. And I think that we need more representatives like myself who are the voice of the people that will fight for this, to reverse this. And it will not be an easy battle, because if most of them are in the pocketbooks of the giant corporations on Wall Street and the billionaires, how are the voices of the people going to be heard if it's just me? We need more and more people like myself elected. We need to look past the labels and realize that this is not a fight Democrat or Republican. This is a fight of we the people against the conglomerates. And the other one is the Citizens United, if you guys heard about that. That only made it worse. It was a decision made by the Supreme Court, but with only one vote that was a swing vote. And it basically allows money to be spent without accountability. And that's not the way it was written. And even the Supreme Court justices that voted for the right of Citizens United said Congress needs to look at this and amend laws. And they are not doing it. They're even not listening to the Supreme Court. And then the last one is there's a new thing going on right now. It's called the Disclose Act. And I believe it's on our ballot this November.
It is.
And what it basically does, it has another workaround with this money in politics. And what it says is, fine, you want to spend an unlimited amount of money and you don't want to tell us who you are? If you place any kind of an ad, television, print, audio, you must disclose to the American people what is behind it, who is the money behind it. Not some silly name like America for a Better America, which doesn't tell you what it is, but paid for by Goldman Sachs, paid for by, and it should list the top 3 biggest donors that give the most money for this organization, and it must disclose their entire information. And I think that's a fantastic way of approaching this. You want to make it legal? Then we have a right to know who you are.
All right, we're running out of time, so
Sure.
I just want to ask you one more question,
Sure.
which deals with money too, and that's our tax structure. Everybody wants to cut taxes, but some people say taxes only cut for the upper class, people in the middle class. How do you feel about that? What do you think we should be going in regard to tax policy?
You must have looked at my website, because that's a subject that's also very near and dear to my heart. I feel the 2008 disaster that happened, who got hurt the most? It was the middle class, right?
Yeah.
The middle class was hurt the most. And what did we do? We did the best we could to recover. What we did that I think was wrong is we bailed out the companies that were too big to fail with very little strings attached to the bailouts. and they're continuing to do the same disastrous practices as they were doing before. Instead of looking at who got hurt the most, it was the middle class. Why didn't the middle class get a bailout? So my plan, and I may be a solitary voice in this, but my plan is that the middle class should get to pay no income tax. $120,000 a year or less, you pay zero income tax until we recover out of this great recession. If you're making 120 to 1.2 million, you pay the same taxes as you do now. And anything above that, that small fraction will pay the difference. And the difference is not that large. If you look at all the money that the revenue that's collected from the IRS, 20% of it, less than 20% of it comes from folks that are making 120,000 a year or less. So it's not a very large amount, and it would give us so much extra money to go on vacations, to buy things, to invest things. It will turn this economy, and everyone knows a strong economy is a strong middle class. And this would be a great motivation factor for the middle class.
Okay. Ron, where can people get in touch with you if they want to join the campaign, they want to learn more about it? What's the best way for people to contact you? And
thank you.
Of course, donate.
Thank you, absolutely. Very simple, ron4u.com. Ron, the number 4, the letter u.com. Or you can spell out my full name, ronvereste.com. They both go to the same place. And in there, there's an opportunity for you to volunteer, to contribute, to support us any way you can at any capacity. We only have a few weeks left, and what's important is to get the word out. I believe every time I've ever met any voter, once they met me and heard what I had to say, they didn't care what party I belonged to, and they supported me. And it's about getting the word out to the voters to know that there is an option, an alternative to the incumbent who is not the voice of the people.
Great.
Well, Ron, thank you very, very much for being with us. We really appreciate it and for taking the time. And both Ron Vereste and Ari Grayson, who we spoke with earlier today, they share the progressive values that your friends and neighbors at the Laguna Woods Democratic Club have. They believe in economic justice and social justice. They believe in getting money out of politics, and they believe in investing in our future. They are looking ahead. If they're driving the car, they're looking through the windshield to see what the future holds. They're not trying to move the country forward by nostalgically glancing through the rear view mirror. They've both been great friends to the Laguna Woods Democratic Club and been great friends to us for a long time. So we really hope, we support them completely, support them and endorse them 100%, and we hope that everybody else will when they go to vote on November the 8th or when you fill out your vote by mail ballot. Just as important as voting for Ron Vereste for 45th Congressional District, U.S. House of Representatives, and Ari Grayson for the 37th Senatorial District is to vote. You know, it's the most basic thing we can do. It's the most elemental thing we can do in our democracy. And voting in California is easy. Voting other places in the world isn't easy. Voting other places in this country isn't easy. So let's take advantage of it. Like we have this great Southern California weather we all take advantage of. So let's take advantage of the ease of voting. Let's get out and vote.
November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.